My own son grabbed my glasses, threw them out the front door, and barked, "If you can't keep track of your stuff, don't use anything." Before I could answer, my 7-year-old grandson changed everything with one quiet question. The room went still. I looked at Mark first, then at the front door where my reading glasses had disappeared into the flower bed beside the porch. Jennifer stood next to him with her arms folded. Ethan looked back and forth between all of us, his little backpack still hanging from one shoulder. Then he asked in the calmest voice imaginable, "Dad, when you get old, should I throw your glasses away too? Just like you did, Grandpa?" Nobody spoke. Not me, not Mark, not Jennifer. I bent down, slipped on my old sneakers, and stepped outside to look for my glasses. It was one of those chilly April mornings in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The grass was still wet from the night's rain, and my knees complained as I knelt beside the tulips my late wife Carol had planted years before she passed away. One lens had popped out. I picked up the frame anyway. Sometimes things don't break all at once. Sometimes they crack little by little until one morning you finally notice. I wish I could tell you that was the first time my age had caused trouble in our house. It wasn't. I'm Thomas Walker, 72 years old, widowed for almost 8 years. I don't have Alzheimer's. I don't have dementia. My doctor at Mercy Medical Center tells me the same thing every annual checkup. "Thomas, your memory's pretty good for your age. The only problem is that I sometimes leave my glasses in the pantry, or my keys on top of the washing machine, or the TV remote in the refrigerator after carrying groceries inside." Little things, the kind of things that happen when you've spent 70 years collecting routines. The funny part was that I almost never forgot the important things. Every weekday morning I was up before 6, coffee first, then oatmeal for Ethan because he hated cold cereal. By 7:30 I'd be standing in the driveway waving goodbye as the school bus pulled away. Every afternoon at 3:15 I'd be waiting outside Roosevelt Elementary before Ethan came running out with his untied shoelaces and 1,000 stories about second grade. Back home, I'd help him with homework while Jennifer finished work on her laptop upstairs. If something around the house needed fixing, I usually handled it. Leaky faucet, dead smoke detector battery, loose cabinet hinge, mowing the lawn, replacing porch lights, cleaning the gutters every fall. Nothing heroic. Just the little jobs that keep a house running without anyone noticing. Until they stop getting done. Jennifer wasn't a bad person. At least I never thought she was. She was busy. She worked remotely for an insurance company and always seemed to have another meeting, another deadline, another email to answer. But somewhere along the way, my misplaced belongings started wearing on her patience. "Has anyone seen my glasses?" I'd ask. Silence. 5 minutes later, I'd eventually find them sitting on the kitchen counter or beside the coffee maker. Sometimes I caught Jennifer looking at me with a tired expression that said more than words ever could. One afternoon, I spent 20 minutes looking for my house keys. I finally found them inside the hall closet. I didn't think much of it. What I didn't know was that Jennifer had seen exactly where I'd left them. Instead of telling me, she'd quietly picked them up and put them somewhere else. Not because she wanted me out of the house, not because she hated me. She was simply tired of hearing me ask where everything was. Another time, Mark walked into the kitchen while Jennifer was holding my wallet. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I'm just putting it somewhere safer," she answered with a shrug. Mark nodded and went back upstairs. From that day on, he seemed more convinced that I was becoming impossible to live with. I never knew those little misunderstandings were stacking up like firewood. Until the morning my glasses disappeared. Until my son lost his temper. Until my grandson asked one innocent question that none of us would ever forget. I carried my bent glasses into the house and set them on the kitchen table. One of the lenses was missing, but I didn't say a word. There wasn't much left to say anyway. Jennifer busied herself wiping down the counter that was already clean. Mark grabbed his car keys without looking at me. Only Ethan stood there confused, like he couldn't understand why grown-ups suddenly acted so strange. "Grandpa," he whispered, tugging on my sleeve, "are your glasses okay?" I smiled the best I could. I've had tougher mornings. That earned me a tiny grin from him. Children have a way of accepting answers adults know aren't true. The rest of the day passed quietly. Too quietly. That evening, I sat on the back porch watching the sun disappear behind the maple trees. I'd done that almost every night since Carol passed away. She used to say sunsets reminded her that endings weren't always sad. Sometimes they were just another kind of beginning. I didn't believe that then. I wasn't sure I believed it now. Inside the house, I could hear Mark and Jennifer talking after they thought I'd gone to bed. Their voices drifted through the open kitchen window. "We can't keep living like this," Jennifer sighed. "I know. It's every single day, Mark." "He doesn't mean to." "I know he doesn't." There was a long pause. Then Jennifer spoke more quietly. "Maybe he'd be happier somewhere that can take care of him." I knew what somewhere meant. A nursing home. I kept staring at the fading sky. Mark didn't answer right away. Finally he said, "Do you know how much those places cost?" I looked it up. "So did I." Another silence. Then Jennifer said the part she probably thought nobody else would ever hear. "If he starts paying $3,500 a month," she whispered, "there won't be much left later." I closed my eyes. There it was. Not anger, not hatred, money. The savings Carol and I had built over 45 years of working, paying mortgages, skipping vacations, and fixing things instead of replacing them. Money they already thought of as theirs. I didn't feel furious. I just felt old. The next morning, I called 3 nursing homes before breakfast. The woman at the second one sounded kind. "Maple Grove Senior Living. This is Linda." I asked if they had any openings. They did. I scheduled a visit for Friday. I didn't tell anyone. On Friday afternoon, I drove myself over. The place surprised me. There were flower beds by the entrance. A group of men were playing checkers on the patio. 2 women laughed so hard over coffee that one nearly spilled her cup. It didn't feel like a place people went to wait for life to end. It felt peaceful. Linda showed me around. The apartments weren't large, just a bedroom, a small living room, a kitchenette. Enough space for one person and a lifetime of memories. She asked gently, "What brings you here, Thomas?" I thought about lying. Instead, I smiled. "I think my family deserves some peace." She looked at me for a moment, then quietly replied, "Sometimes people your age come here because they think they're helping everyone else." I didn't answer, because she was right. That weekend, I packed 2 suitcases. Mark noticed first. "Dad, what's all this?" I found a place. His forehead tightened. "What place?" "A nursing home." Jennifer froze halfway through unloading groceries. Mark stared at me. "You already signed papers?" I nodded. "I'm moving on Monday." For a second, neither of them spoke. Not because they wanted me to stay, because they hadn't expected me to decide so quickly. Jennifer finally asked, "You're paying for it yourself?" "Yes." Another silence. One I understood far better than they realized. Then little footsteps raced down the hallway. Ethan. He looked from the suitcases to my face. "Grandpa." His eyes filled instantly. "Are you leaving?" I knelt carefully so we were eye level. "I'll still see you, buddy." "But who's going to pick me up after school?" The question hit harder than anything else that week. I wrapped my arms around him. "You'll be okay." He shook his head against my shoulder. "I don't want okay." Neither did I. Monday morning, I loaded my own luggage into the trunk. No arguments, no dramatic speeches, just one quiet decision. As I closed the trunk, I looked back at the house Carol and I had bought 38 years earlier. For the first time, it no longer felt like home. 3 weeks after I moved into Maple Grove Senior Living, I realized something that surprised me. Nobody there treated me like I was in the way. My morning started with coffee in the sunroom instead of wondering whether I'd forgotten something before breakfast. Around 10, a retired mechanic named Walt usually talked me into joining a card game I insisted I wasn't good at. On Tuesdays, there was a woodworking class. On Thursdays, a local church choir came by to sing old country songs. I hadn't laughed that much in years. Even my doctor noticed the difference. "You seem more relaxed, Thomas," he said during a routine visit. "I think I finally stopped waiting for someone to get irritated with me." He smiled, but he didn't argue. Every evening at 7, my phone rang, or rather I called. Ethan would answer before anyone else could. "Grandpa," he'd tell me about spelling tests, soccer practice, or how he finally beat a level on his Nintendo Switch. We never talked for very long. 10 minutes, maybe 15. It became my favorite part of every day. Meanwhile, life at Mark's house was changing in ways none of us had expected. I didn't know all of it at first. Most of it I learned later. The babysitter they hired was a nice college student from Coe College named Amanda. She showed up every weekday after school, helped Ethan with homework, and stayed until one of his parents got home. She did exactly what they paid her to do: watch Ethan, nothing more. When the kitchen faucet started leaking, it stayed that way for almost 2 weeks before Mark found time to call a plumber. The porch light burned out. Nobody replaced it. The lawn grew higher than the neighbors liked. Packages sat on the front porch because nobody was home to bring them inside. One Saturday morning, Mark spent nearly 4 hours trying to replace the garbage disposal. He finally gave up and called a repair company. It cost almost $300. Before I moved out, it would have taken me about 40 minutes. Not because I was special, because I'd been fixing little things my whole life. The small jobs people never notice until nobody's doing them anymore. Mark started working later to cover the extra expenses. Jennifer carried more of the house by herself. Dinner, laundry, groceries, school forms, appointments, the endless list that keeps a family moving. One evening, she couldn't find her car keys. The next morning, it was her reading glasses. 2 days later, she spent 15 minutes searching for her wallet before realizing she'd left it inside a reusable grocery bag. By Friday, she was exhausted. Mark walked into the kitchen and found every cabinet door open. "What are you looking for?" "My glasses." "They're on your head." She took them off and laughed once. Not because it was funny, because she was too tired to do anything else. Then Mark sighed. "Jennifer, what's going on with you lately? Why do you keep losing everything?" She spun around. "Seriously, I'm just asking." "No, you're not. You're criticizing me. I'm saying you've been forgetting things every day. Maybe because I'm trying to do the work of 3 people." The kitchen fell silent. Ethan looked up from the table where he was coloring dinosaurs. He wasn't trying to interrupt. He simply spoke. "Grandpa forgot little things, too." Neither of them answered. He continued coloring. Then he said quietly, "Mom, you used to get upset when Grandpa couldn't find his glasses." Jennifer stood completely still. No excuses, no anger, just silence. Later that night, while putting away clean towels, she finally found her reading glasses folded inside one of them. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding them in both hands. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about herself. She was remembering an old man walking slowly from room to room, politely asking if anyone had seen his glasses. And for the first time, she wondered how many times she'd known exactly where they were. About a month after I moved into Maple Grove, Ethan and I settled into a routine. Every evening at 7, we'd talk over video for a few minutes. He'd show me a drawing, tell me about a spelling test, or complain that his dad still couldn't make grilled cheese the way I did. Kids notice funny little things. They also notice the important ones. One Wednesday evening, Ethan looked unusually quiet. "Everything okay, buddy?" He nodded, then shrugged. "I guess." That was a 7-year-old's way of saying no. Before I could ask another question, Jennifer called him for dinner. "We'll talk tomorrow, Grandpa." "Sounds good." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. The next Saturday, Mark invited me over for lunch. It was the first invitation I'd received since moving out. I almost said no, not because I was angry, because I didn't want them to feel obligated. Still, Ethan sounded so excited on the phone that morning. "Please come, Grandpa." So I did. The house looked exactly the same. The maple tree in the front yard, Carol's wind chimes on the porch, the old mailbox I'd painted 3 summers ago. Only the atmosphere felt different. Nobody seemed relaxed anymore. Lunch was quiet, mostly small talk. Ethan filled the silence by talking about baseball. After dessert, Jennifer cleared them plates while Mark helped Ethan wash his hands. I stepped into the backyard for some fresh air. The kitchen window was cracked open. I wasn't trying to listen. Sometimes conversations simply find you. Jennifer sighed. "I don't know why we're still feeling guilty." Mark didn't answer. She continued. "It wasn't our fault." Another pause. Dad kept losing everything. Before either adult could say another word, a little voice spoke. "But Mom," it was Ethan. "I've seen you put Grandpa's things away lots of times." Silence. "You did." That was Mark. I thought you were helping him. I, Jennifer stumbled over the words. I just, Ethan kept talking, completely unaware of the storm he had started. Sometimes Grandpa would ask where his glasses were. You knew. You just didn't tell him. The kitchen became so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming. Then Mark spoke, very slowly. The keys. Jennifer looked at him. The wallet. She lowered her eyes. My reading glasses. Her shoulders slumped. I know. Mark leaned it against the counter as if someone had knocked the strength out of him. I thought you were putting everything somewhere safe. Jennifer's voice barely came out. At first I was, she swallowed. Then I got tired. I was frustrated. I just wanted him to stop asking. Mark rubbed both hands across his face. So every time I thought Dad was getting worse, Jennifer started crying. I didn't think. No, Mark interrupted quietly. I don't think either of us did. Neither voice was angry. That somehow made it harder to hear. I quietly walked toward the side gate. They didn't know I had heard any of it, and I wanted to keep it that way. As I reached my truck, the front door opened. Mark caught up with me. Dad, I turned around. You leaving already? I think Ethan's had enough excitement for one afternoon. Mark nodded, then looked down at his shoes. I owe you an apology. I put a hand on his shoulder. You don't owe me one until you understand what you're apologizing for. He frowned. I threw your glasses. Yes. I believed things that weren't true. Yes. But that's not the whole story. He looked confused. I smiled gently. The hardest person to forgive isn't always someone else. It's usually yourself. He watched me climb into my truck. I could see the questions all over his face. For the first time in a long while, my son had stopped blaming everyone around him and started looking inward instead. The apology Mark offered that afternoon stayed with me longer than I expected. Not because it fixed anything, it didn't. Some things take more than one conversation to heal. Back at Maple Grove, life kept moving at its own gentle pace. Every Friday afternoon, a group of us played dominoes in the activity room. Walt still insisted I cheated, even though I lost more games than I won. Dorothy from down the hall baked blueberry muffins for anyone celebrating a birthday, whether she knew them well or not. Some evenings we'd sit outside and watch the sun settle behind the oak trees. Nobody was in a hurry. For the first time since Carol died, I wasn't measuring my days by what needed fixing. I still missed Ethan every single day, but I had stopped feeling like I was simply waiting for life to happen. Then little by little I noticed something changing during our evening video calls. It wasn't what Ethan said. It was what he didn't. He smiled less. He seemed to study his parents more carefully before answering questions. Children are always watching, even when adults think they're distracted. One Tuesday evening, Jennifer leaned into the camera. Hi, Thomas. Hi, Jennifer. You look well. I've been keeping busy. She nodded. There was something different about her. She looked tired, not physically, emotionally, as if she'd been carrying around a thought she couldn't put down. Before either of us could say anything else, Ethan tugged on her sleeve. Mom, can I talk to Grandpa by myself? She smiled. Of course. She walked out of the room. Ethan lowered his voice. Grandpa. Yeah, buddy. Are you happy there? I looked around my little apartment, the bookshelf, Carol's framed photograph, the rocking chair by the window. I am, he smiled. I'm glad. Then he hesitated. Can I ask you something? Always. Did Mom and Dad make you sad? That question landed softly, but it went deep. I thought for a moment. They made some mistakes. Did they hurt your feelings? They probably did. Were you mad? I shook my head. I was hurt. That's different. He seemed to think about that. Then he quietly said, I was mad. I smiled a little. I know. No. He looked down at his hands. I'm still mad. A few days later, Jennifer picked Ethan up from soccer practice. On the drive home, he was unusually quiet. Finally, she asked, Everything okay? He stared out the passenger window. Mom. Yes. I don't think you and Dad loved Grandpa very much. Jennifer gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. Why would you say that? Because when I forget my homework, You help me. When I leave my jacket at school, you don't yell, she swallowed. When Grandpa forgot where he left his glasses, he looked all by himself. You still got upset. Jennifer blinked hard. Ethan wasn't accusing her. He was trying to understand. I never saw Grandpa yell at anybody. He paused. But I saw everybody get mad at Grandpa. Jennifer had no answer. That night, she found herself standing in the hallway outside the spare bedroom that used to be mine. The room was empty now except for an old dresser and a few boxes. She opened the top drawer. Inside was a photo album. One picture showed me kneeling beside Ethan's first bicycle, tightening the training wheels. Another showed the two of us making pancakes on a snowy Saturday morning. One more showed me teaching Ethan how to hold a fishing rod at Lake McBride. Jennifer turned another page. She whispered to herself. All I could remember was the things he forgot. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But Ethan remembered everything he gave. Miles away, I sat in my apartment at Maple Grove, laughing through another domino game. I had no idea that healing had finally begun. Not because someone had won an argument, because a little boy had quietly shown the adults around him what love was supposed to look like. Summer slipped into early fall before any of us realized it. The maple trees around Cedar Rapids had just started turning orange when Ethan called one evening, sounding more excited than I'd heard in months. Grandpa, guess what? I'm guessing you hit a home run. He laughed. No, even better. Well, now you've got me curious. Our school is having Grandparents' Day next month. That sounds like fun. It is. He paused, then added, every kid has to tell a story about their grandparent. I smiled. I bet you'll hear some good ones. I already know which story I'm telling. Before I could ask, Jennifer called him from the kitchen. Dinner's ready. I gotta go, Grandpa. Love you, buddy. Love you too. The screen went dark. I never asked what story he'd chosen. Honestly, it didn't seem important. A few days later, Jennifer drove Ethan to school. As they pulled into the parking lot, his second-grade teacher, Mrs. Collins, waved them over. Good morning, Jennifer smiled. Morning. Mrs. Collins handed Ethan a folder. Don't forget your speech draft tomorrow. Jennifer looked surprised. Speech and for Grandparents' Day, Mrs. Collins explained. The children are writing about someone special. Oh, Jennifer glanced down at Ethan. What are you writing about? He smiled mysteriously. You'll hear it that day. Mrs. Collins laughed. He won't let anyone read it except me. Jennifer thought that was cute. She assumed Ethan was planning something funny, maybe the time I accidentally wore 2 different socks to church, or the afternoon we got caught in a rainstorm while fishing. Something lighthearted. At Maple Grove, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Wednesday mornings were my favorite because a local elementary school choir came to sing old American classics. Most of the residents sang along. Some forgot the lyrics. Nobody minded. One afternoon, Linda, the activities director, sat beside me during lunch. You seem happier these days. I think I am. Any family coming to visit this weekend? Ethan usually comes every couple of weeks. You must miss him. I do. But he's exactly where he belongs. She nodded thoughtfully. And where do you belong? I looked around the dining room. Friends laughing, someone complaining about the coffee, someone else arguing over a crossword puzzle. I smiled. I think I finally found my place. Meanwhile, at home, something had quietly changed. Mark and Jennifer argued less, not because every problem had disappeared, because they had both grown tired of blaming each other. One evening after dinner, Mark found Jennifer sitting at the kitchen table staring at an old family photo. It showed me holding Ethan on my shoulders at the county fair. I never noticed how happy he looked, Jennifer said softly. Mark pulled out a chair. He adored Dad. He still does. Jennifer traced the edge of the photograph with her finger. I kept thinking your father was making our lives harder. She looked toward the living room where Ethan was building a Lego castle. I never realized how much easier he was making them. Neither of them spoke for a while. Sometimes silence says everything words can't. The night before Grandparents' Day, Ethan sat at his little desk with a sheet of notebook paper. He read his speech one last time. Jennifer walked past his bedroom. You ready for tomorrow? I think so. Nervous. A little, she smiled. You'll do great. After she turned off the hallway light, Ethan folded the paper carefully and slipped it back into his backpack. Downstairs, Mark laid out a clean button-down shirt for the morning. Jennifer ironed Ethan's favorite blue polo. Neither parent had the slightest idea what their son was about to say. They climbed into bed believing the hardest part of their family story was already behind them. They couldn't have been more wrong. The gymnasium at Roosevelt Elementary smelled exactly the way school gyms always do. Floor polish, fresh coffee, construction paper. Rows of folding chairs filled the room while parents and grandparents found their seats. Children's artwork covered the walls, and a banner stretched across the stage that read, "Happy Grandparents' Day, I wasn't there." Not because I hadn't been invited. No one had invited me. That morning I had joined Walt and Dorothy for coffee at Maple Grove. We joked about whose knees could predict the weather better. Around 10, I helped another resident figure out the remote control in the TV lounge. It was an ordinary morning. I had no idea that 30 minutes away, my grandson was about to change our family's story forever. Mark and Jennifer sat in the third row. Ethan waved at them from the stage. Mrs. Collins stepped up to the microphone. "Today, our students are going to share a memory about someone who has helped shape their lives." The audience smiled. The first few children were exactly what everyone expected. One talked about baking cookies with Grandma. Another described fishing with Grandpa. People laughed. They applauded. Then Mrs. Collins smiled toward the side of the stage. "Our next speaker is Ethan Walker." Ethan walked to the microphone carrying one folded sheet of paper. His feet barely reached the floor as he stood behind it. He looked out at the audience. Then he began. "My grandpa forgets where he leaves his glasses and his keys." A few parents smiled. Someone chuckled softly. It sounded like the beginning of a funny story. Ethan looked down at his paper. "But Grandpa never forgot my favorite food." The room became quieter. "He never forgot to pick me up after school." Mark slowly lowered his eyes. "He never forgot anyone's birthday." Jennifer stopped smiling. "He only forgot little things." There wasn't a sound in the gym anymore. Ethan looked up from the paper. His voice became smaller. "I miss him." He tried to keep reading. Instead, tears filled his eyes. Mrs. Collins took one step toward him, but Ethan gently shook his head. He wanted to finish. "I think—" He wiped his face with his sleeve. "I think Grandpa got mad at Dad after Dad threw Grandpa's glasses out the window." Silence. Not awkward silence. Not confused silence. The kind of silence that settles over a room when everyone suddenly understands something they wish they didn't. No one moved. No one whispered. Several grandparents quietly looked toward Mark. Jennifer stared at the floor. Her hands trembled in her lap. Mark couldn't bring himself to look at anyone. Ethan folded his paper. "I just want Grandpa to know," his voice cracked again, "that I love him." Mrs. Collins walked over and wrapped an arm around his shoulders. The audience stood. Not because it was part of the program, because nobody knew what else to do. The applause was gentle, almost respectful. Mark clapped too. His eyes never left his son. After the ceremony, parents gathered in the hallway. People smiled politely. A few nodded to Mark. Nobody confronted him. Nobody criticized him. That somehow made it worse. As they walked toward the parking lot, Jennifer whispered, "I feel like everyone knows." Mark answered quietly, "They do." Neither of them spoke for the rest of the drive home. That afternoon, one of the parents uploaded the video to the school's parent group. By evening, it had been shared dozens of times. One of Maple Grove's volunteers happened to have a granddaughter at Roosevelt Elementary. She recognized Ethan. Later that night, she knocked softly on my apartment door. "Thomas, I think there's something you should see." She handed me her phone. I watched the entire speech without saying a word. When Ethan reached the last sentence, I took off my glasses. Not because I couldn't see, because suddenly everything had become blurry. I wiped my eyes, smiled through the tears, and whispered to an empty room, "I miss you too, buddy." I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan after watching that video. Not the speech itself, his face, the way he fought back tears because he wanted to finish what he'd started. I barely slept that night. The next morning I called Mark. He answered on the second ring. "Dad, I was wondering—" I paused. Would it be all right if I came by this afternoon? I'd like to see Ethan. There was a long silence. Then he quietly said, "We'd love that." When I pulled into the driveway, Ethan spotted my truck before I even turned off the engine. The front door flew open. "Grandpa." He ran so fast I barely had time to open my arms before he crashed into them. I held him tightly. "I've missed you, buddy." "I missed you more." I laughed. "I don't think that's a contest either of us can win." He looked up at me. "Did you see my speech?" I did. "Were you mad?" I smiled. "No." I was proud. He wrapped his arms around me one more time. "I just wanted everyone to know who you really are." Behind him, Mark and Jennifer stood quietly on the porch. Neither interrupted us. After Ethan ran inside to show me a model airplane he'd been building, Mark stepped toward me. "Dad." His voice shook. "I'm sorry." This time I could hear the difference. He wasn't apologizing because he felt embarrassed. He was apologizing because he finally understood. "I blamed you for things that weren't your fault. I let my frustration become disrespect. I stopped seeing everything you did for us." His eyes filled with tears, and I forgot that Ethan was watching me. Jennifer stepped forward next. She couldn't look me in the eye at first. "I owe you more than an apology." She took a slow breath. "I was impatient. I knew where your things were. I moved them. Sometimes, I even hid them. I kept telling myself you were making life harder." She wiped away a tear. "But after you left, I realized you were making our lives easier every single day." She gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "I even started losing my own glasses. I finally understood how exhausted you must have felt, looking for things while feeling like everyone was annoyed with you." Then her voice broke. "The worst part wasn't that." I waited. "The worst part was hearing Ethan tell me he didn't think we loved you." No excuse, no defense, just truth. I never wanted my son to believe kindness disappears when people get old. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Finally, I reached over and gently squeezed her hand. We all become someone we're not proud of sometimes. The important part is what we choose after that. Jennifer nodded through her tears. "We're choosing differently." We spent the afternoon together. Ethan proudly showed me every room in the house as though I'd never seen it before. The birdhouse we'd built together was still hanging in the backyard. The tomatoes we'd planted in the spring had finally ripened. Some things had kept growing while all of us were busy learning. As the afternoon faded, Mark walked me to my truck. "Dad, would you come home?" I smiled. "I already am home." He looked confused. "I don't mean this house. I mean Maple Grove." I looked back toward the porch where Ethan was waving. "I have friends there. I have my own routine. I have purpose. And something I didn't realize I'd been missing. Dignity." Mark nodded slowly. "I understand. And will come to you. You don't have to ask." From that weekend forward, they visited every Saturday. Sometimes we played cards. Sometimes we walked the garden paths. Sometimes Ethan and I simply sat on a bench feeding birds while Mark and Jennifer talked with the friends I'd made. Nobody pretended the past hadn't happened. We simply stopped letting it decide our future. Growing older taught me that forgiveness isn't pretending someone never hurt you. It's choosing not to let that hurt become the last chapter of your story. For the younger generation, here's what I hope you'll remember one day. The hands that held yours may become the hands that tremble. Growing older doesn't happen overnight. It happens one ordinary day at a time. The patience and kindness you show your parents and grandparents today may become the example your own children follow tomorrow. And for those of us who are growing older, here's the lesson I had to learn myself. Don't measure your worth by how much you can still do for others. Your value was never in the chores you finished or the problems you solved. It has always been in the love, wisdom, and steady presence you leave behind. Sometimes choosing a place where you can live with dignity isn't giving up on your family. It's giving everyone the chance to become a better one. If this story reminded you of someone you love, I hope you'll reach out to them while you still can. And if you've ever learned one of life's greatest lessons from a parent or grandparent, I'd truly love to hear about it in the comments. Until next time, take good care of yourself and never overlook the quiet people who make life easier simply by being there.